Well, thank you for having me. My name is John Ingates, CTO at Rackspace, and I'm pleased to be here at Structure today. We are going to be talking about, obviously, some OpenStack and hybrid cloud and the Nextcloud. And whenever Rackspace comes to this event, we sort of, our goal is to challenge the conventional wisdom and make sure that we're thinking differently and hopefully enlightening you on some of the things that we're working on. And to help me in a few minutes, I'm going to bring out a panel to chat with them. But I want to just sort of go through a few slides to give you a little sense and set the stage for this. So I think that we'll sort of start with this and remind you, I think I clicked twice. Can you go back one slide, please? So last year, Lou Moorman was up here on the stage, and he spent time talking to you about how OpenStack, he predicted that OpenStack would become a core operating system, a platform upon which, or the cloud, I should say, will be a core operating system upon which lots of applications, the next generation of applications will be built. And like every operating system throughout history, like every platform throughout history, they've oftentimes started on a proprietary platform, a commercial platform. And in almost every case, along comes an open source project or an open source alternative. And you're seeing this play out within the cloud as well. The OpenStack ecosystem is coming on very strong. We've seen a number of companies over the last 2 years get involved in OpenStack, join the community, and we're seeing a tremendous amount of momentum in this ecosystem. We're seeing all kinds of innovation start to make their way into the OpenStack platform. I could not be more pleased with the success of the OpenStack platform, and I think it is a great counterpoint maybe to the big public cloud guys. One of the things that one of the things we've been seeing in this point is this exponential growth in features. And the uses of OpenStack, the users of OpenStack have also been growing. We got really quite a bit of scrutiny around how many users you have, how many users are using OpenStack. And I think that at this last OpenStack Summit about 6 weeks ago, we saw a tremendous amount of user stories come out. These are real customers using OpenStack today. They are using it for all kinds of workloads. We've seen a tremendous amount of adoption by not only vendors, but also users of the cloud computing platform. And we're very excited about this. We think it's happening for a number of reasons. Obviously, a lot of people do value open source. Open source is one of the things that has been one of the key ingredients of innovation on the web and on the internet for many, many years. And I think it's also going to be a very critical component of the cloud. This momentum is hard to deny. We're seeing hundreds and hundreds of companies join OpenStack. Thousands of developers. We saw a tremendous increase, a doubling of the attendees at the OpenStack conference recently. And I think even more important than this ecosystem and the technology's evolved, but even more important than that is really just sort of this killer feature of OpenStack. The killer feature is the fact that the OpenStack powers private and hybrid clouds. Basically, this is the idea that you can run a hybrid cloud using the same technology in the public cloud as you run in a private cloud. You can run it anywhere. You can run it optimized for your workload. Enterprises value this because they are seeing a challenge in sort of making sense of the move to cloud computing in the context of their private cloud and on-premise kind of workloads. They want to make sure that they have a story to make that all work together. And OpenStack is really the foundation for that. So this killer feature of being able to run hybrid clouds is one of the things that we're seeing, and it's very important to how applications are going to get developed. If you think about why it's so important, you kind of have to go back and think about the public cloud and why it was so valuable. Why was public cloud such a compelling story for a developer? Why did they value it so much? Well, they saw it as a way to get infrastructure very quickly. They could spin it up in 3 minutes instead of 3 days. And it all was because we took software. We put software on top of this multi-tenant and generalized platform. When I say generalized, I mean sort of general purpose. It's something that works for a lot of different kinds of applications. And it is all powered by software. And it gave us tremendous benefits. I mean, it was something that was literally intoxicating to developers. They could get the speed, the pay for what you use, the low unit cost. It was intoxicating. But that doesn't come without a trade. And I think people are starting to wake up from a hangover. This is my hangover slide. They're sort of in a hangover at this point around this, this race to the public cloud. The public cloud was supposed to solve all of our problems. It was supposed to be this magical thing that made everything easier and better. But it did come with trades that were, very difficult to solve sometimes in the public cloud. So, when you have, if you think about it, if you have a platform that powers innovation, you're going to sort of use it. You're going to take advantage of it. But you have to remember that there are trades, and you do lose certain things by going to a multi-tenant sort of shared model. And you do gain a lot if you can sort of get back to single tenant and controlled and sort of having the ability to customize. So let's think about some of those trade-offs for just a second. Some of them come in the form of, in the public cloud, you start to see things like the per unit cost. That's a positive. That's what people like, utility billing and speed. But the private cloud has some very strong benefits. Security is easy to solve for in a private context or in a hybrid context. If you can put together the best of both, and you can get the benefits of the public cloud and the private cloud together, and you can build this idea of hybrid cloud, that is really what we believe to be the long-term end state. And yes, there's a lot of people in the room that would probably argue with me and say, look, we can solve all these problems in the public cloud. We can make it better. Yes, you can, but you do a tremendous amount of over-engineering and over-provisioning to make that possible. You have to engineer a lot of software on top of the public cloud to make it as reliable as some of the private clouds we're seeing. And there's another factor to this. We think on the surface that public cloud is cheap. It looks cheap because of that idea of per unit cost that's low. But when you spin up a whole lot of that per unit cost and aggregate it together, you start to see things that the generalized platform isn't really optimized for, and you actually find some better economics when you can blend these two things together. And we're seeing companies every day that are telling us they get to a certain point with public cloud spend. Even on Rackspace Public Cloud, they grow from their startup phase, they start to grow faster and faster, and they get to an inflection point or a crossover point where the dedicated servers that we used to use or the private cloud context that we used to use, it starts to make more sense than just a pure public cloud kind of a story by itself. So this idea of outgrowing the public cloud is not just Rackspace telling you this. We're starting to hear that from customers, people telling us that it's not all that it was cracked up to be. The public cloud was intoxicating, but we're starting to see an alternative, and that hybrid is the end state. Hybrid is this blending of these form factors, these different types of infrastructure into a common, coherent sort of service. And that's what we want to talk about here. We want to set the stage for this conversation around hybrid cloud. And at this point, I want to bring out a couple of folks that are going to discuss this with me. The first one is from a very large enterprise titan. His name is Keith Shin, and he's the VP of Infrastructure at Fidelity. So Keith, why don't you come on out? And here, I'll show you a slide with their logos. The other is, hey, thanks, Keith. Nice to see you. And then the other is the CIO of HubSpot, Jim O'Neill, will be coming out. So Jim, come on out, and we'll sit down and have a little chat about what we're doing in the hybrid. So welcome these guys to the stage, please. Give them a hand. So Jim, why don't you're an OpenStack user. You're a big OpenStack shop at this point. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your OpenStack-powered hybrid cloud, what you're doing with it, how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So HubSpot is a pure hybrid cloud, I'd like to say, where we run a good amount in Rackspace's environment. This is not about Rackspace. It's more about OpenStack. And we're running everything. We are a marketing services software company. And I don't like to use the word big data because I think that's overused, but we've got a lot of data. We're processing about 1 trillion data points a month, about 250 billion net new every 4 weeks. And we really found that OpenStack specifically, because we can tune the environments for the workloads, you actually can really drive every single ounce of productivity out of these infrastructures. And that was a real big deal for us. So we've been in the public cloud. We love the public cloud. I think John touched a little bit on outgrowing it. I look at it a little bit of the right workload for the right infrastructure, and I think that's kind of an emerging theme. And for us, we have a mix of web applications, API layers, and then I don't like to use the word high performance computing because I think people associate time and sensitivity to that, where our product is very much a streaming product, so time sensitivity is hugely important. And that's what I find very valuable about an OpenStack private environment where we can really get every ounce of energy out of these commodity servers for all intents and purposes.
Yeah. And Keith, would you just give us a brief overview of what you're doing? You're with Fidelity, huge investment in OpenStack. I mean, you've been involved with OpenStack since the early days. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with it, what you're planning to do in terms of what OpenStack solves for.
Yeah, so we're clearly starting from the private cloud standpoint with the intent to grow to a hybrid cloud model to burst external. We feel like we have the scale right now to compete on the internal for the private cloud space. The OpenStack relationship is really important to us because we like the community behind it and the broad support from a number of different players within the space that we can contribute back to it. And clearly we think that even OpenStack needs to evolve some more, that there's some opportunities to add some enterprise sort of features. Right now it seems to be more geared towards the public cloud space, but we think that there's an opportunity to possibly collaborate with other enterprises to deliver on some of these capabilities that we all need, like integration to back-end common core systems.
Right. I think that is one of the valuable aspects of OpenStack is that community effort and the summits that we all go to. I mean, you guys were both at the OpenStack Summit, and you do see a lot of activity, it's a very vibrant community, a very engaged community to build the features that we all need. And obviously we started with it in the public cloud because that's where it sort of made its way first, and that's where we needed it first. But in a private cloud context, Jim, you guys are running a fairly sizable private cloud, and does it solve your needs? What about the OpenStack platform is making it work for you?
Yeah, so a big thing for HubSpot, and I touched on wanting to be a real hybrid between public and private, is really we look at it as parity. So we can have the exact same application footprint, and we can run that. And OpenStack truly allowed us to kind of unlock a common infrastructure as a service. And I think a lot of people using public clouds get a little lost between what's infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, and kind of how do you differentiate the two. So what we've really found with OpenStack is because its API model is mature and maturing every release, honestly, it's truly let us say we don't need to worry about the plumbing and the orchestration where we want software-defined networks, we want software-defined computing, we want software-defined storage. And it really makes building large-scale applications actually fairly easy. It takes a lot of the headaches out in OpenStack. I think just the open nature of it and the community around it has been phenomenal. We've watched this thing for the last 18 to 24 months, and I never would have guessed where it started compared to where it is today. And I think Keith touched on it needs some more features, but it's pretty amazing where it is.
And you guys are actually involved to an extent in the community. I mean, you're contributing.
Yeah.
You mentioned big data, and you said you're not a big data company, but you're running a big data application as a part of your environment. I think it's Hadoop and HBase and some of those components. What are you doing specifically in OpenStack I know you're working hard on a particular component. Can you tell them a little bit about what you're doing?
Absolutely. So it's almost an oxymoron. We're running OpenStack bare metal. And what that means is we're using the OpenStack bare metal driver on hundreds of commodity servers. And what we really found, this is back to squeezing that last inch out of the hardware, is that when you have these time-sensitive, big-scale workloads, you need to run these servers at 95% throughput, whether it's CPU or memory. And so we run hundreds of nodes, it's thousands of cores, it's approaching about 2 petabytes worth of data. And again, it's all API driven. And that's the beauty, I think, of OpenStack. It's if a developer needs to add 20 more nodes, they literally go to a web console or they run a Python script, and literally in 5 minutes, it's in the network and it's operational, it's doing its job.
Yeah, we had similar kind of things like where you'd have QA performance test things going on, and people fail during the initial part of the test because they'd undersized portions of the infrastructure, and be able to turn around in a few minutes and resize the environment and continue the test, where in our business as usual models, that's probably a week delay in the project.
Yeah. And I think that the key thing I would add, I mentioned the word parity in the OpenStack bare metal driver, it's that same API between the least common denominator of bare metal and then the most common denominator of a very highly orchestrated cloud web app environment, and we see the parity between both.
Now, when you think about Rackspace. I mean, you know, obviously we're one of the founders of OpenStack. We've been involved in this platform. You know, I'll ask you, Keith, first. I mean, what does Rackspace give you? What did you value in the relationship with Rackspace, or what did you gravitate to us for?
So we've been, you know, early on we were, you know, at your site when you guys were talking about announcing and, you know, building the foundation, and been involved with you guys from the start of that. But what we found really valuable about the relationship with Rackspace is the experience you have in the back end of these tools. And, you know, clearly part of what we're doing is we're integrating into an existing private cloud solution, and so we're taking piece parts of the OpenStack components. And your expertise in helping us take that on, you know, in that manner into the tool has been very, very good. And, you know, I'd say the other part of it is we like the way you guys have constructed the relationships, and I think you do this beyond, you know, for everybody. And when you basically have really easy outs within the within your agreements and other things within your product. And so if we want to self-support or whatever within the product space, we can.
Yeah. Jim, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would echo that and add, for us as a late-stage startup, it's truly about getting the right service level for the right piece of infrastructure. So we don't have data centers like Fidelity has massive resources as a startup. I mean, we're still running a lot of infrastructure, but we can leverage Rackspace's inherent knowledge of OpenStack, those founding principles, and create this private environment, a managed environment, or a public environment, and truly have that integrated across the stack, and you guys service it the way that we need it to.
And when you look down the road just a few years, where do you see HubSpot?
HubSpot wants to own the world of marketing. It's a shameless plug.
Yeah, and you're going to use the hybrid cloud to do it.
Yes, we are.
And Keith, what are your plans for OpenStack down the road? Is it going to be a bigger part of your world?
Yeah, we're building plans right now to take on broader parts of our compute into cloud computing, and, you know, OpenStack's a big part of that.
Okay.
And that would be our direction there.
Well, I think we'll leave it at that. I think we're out of time, but I appreciate you guys coming up on stage and chatting with for a few minutes, and thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.